Welcome to The Great Retention with Camber Parker, sponsored by the Yo Prono. I'm Camber, your young professional expert and founder of the Yo Prono, where we bring you the answers you need to know on how to hire and retain talent, starting with the young professionals you work with. There's a lot of young professional fish in the sea, but how do you catch them? And what do you do once you reel them in? That's what we're here for. Today, I'm so excited to have Russell Stahl join us, Greenville City Council member, joining us from Greenville, South Carolina. I had the privilege of working with Russell as the chair of a mentoring program from 2020 and 2021 called Pacesetters through the Greenville Chamber. A Greenville native, Russell has served on city council since 2017 and is the founder of Greenville Forward, a nonprofit that is shepherding and facilitating Vision 2025, which I'm sure we will talk more about today. I invited him to join the show not only because of his leadership in town and his generosity of his time, mentoring hundreds of young professionals over the years, including me, but because I believe the topic of the city and community engagement is so important to the greater conversation of recruiting and retaining young professionals. Russell, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Cameron. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning.
We are going to dive into all of the things that we already have mentioned in the intro, but so much more. So can you just start by giving us a little bit more of a background, so things that we might have missed already in your intro?
Yeah, I am a native Greenvillian. I did a short sabbatical, a 16-year sabbatical in Atlanta before I came to my senses and came back to Greenville 20-something years ago. And it's fascinating to me how Greenville has transformed in that mere 20 years since I've been here, and what an amazing place it is. Also, as a proponent of lifelong learning, I'm currently just entered the PhD program at Clemson, and I'm studying city planning because I so strongly believe the importance of education, the importance of continuous learning, and it's true. I think an old dog can learn new tricks. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of life outside of a career, the life outside of your job, and the importance of creating hobbies and things to do and developing other interests. And as we talk about the importance of relationships, that's going to be important to remember that life balance. And I hope I've lived that gospel in my life. And I'd like to think it's not the sunset of my life, but it's certainly a new chapter.
Well, I think it's amazing. I mean, kudos to you for getting back into the classroom and getting back to school, because I believe in lifelong learning as well. And I think that as a mentor and somebody that a lot of young professionals look up to, that's a really great message to share.
It is odd being older than my professors, but the energy and enthusiasm of the classroom is really incredible. And I think for me, my ultimate goal is to teach and to mentor and try to inspire people to make a difference in Greenville and get involved. And, it's good for all of us.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, can you share an experience that you've had working with a young professional in the past? And I do want to mention that for anybody listening, young professional by definition is 21 to 39 years old. So would love to know an experience that you've had.
And we'd like to think I'm neither young nor professional. So just that
You're an experienced professional.
Yeah, and with Pacesetters, which is a program that you mentioned that the Chamber does, Joe Hackle and I have led, I think we've done it for 12 or 13 years. And so we have 150 young professionals that we mentored over the years. And what's really fulfilling to me is to look back at especially some of those younger classes or earlier classes and seeing what they're doing now. And seeing how they've become involved, not because of Joe or I necessarily, but just because of the energy they have to be engaged and involved in Greenville. So it's really awesome seeing them start to lead and inspire and make a difference in Greenville.
Seeing that trajectory.
And the individual stories, I mean, there's so many. You're a perfect example of how someone can get involved and isn't afraid to get involved. I mean, it's scary. It's kind of scary to call somebody that has been working in industry for decades. But we welcome it.
Right.
We welcome it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and Joe are wonderful examples of what mentors should be. And I'm glad to hear that you keep up with those mentees, right? Like I know you're the first one. I mean, you always keep up, and it's really amazing to see where they started and where they've gone.
Greenville is amazing because of relationships. And I think we'll talk about this a little later, but we're amazing because, and I think we're unique from a lot of other communities where personal relationships are so critically important, not only for your vocation, but for your outside work life. And Joe and I, if we can be part of that connection of people, that's just so critical. The other point about what I've learned from some of my mentees is the value of mentorship and the value of having mentors. I look back at some of mine. Max Heller who was mayor of Greenville, was a big mentor of mine. Joe Vaughn, who was the first African-American to enter Furman, was my ninth and 10th grade English teacher at Greenville High. And the value of having people that you can get advice from, and it's not always great advice, but you can get advice from and bounce things off of and be comfortable with is so critical. So
I think
important.
so too. Well, I'm sure that this is the theme we will continue to talk about, but let's move on with talking a little bit more about what we know right now about young professionals, which is they want to make an impact, right? Research is telling us that this is so important for young professionals. So knowing that, what ways would you encourage young professionals to get involved in their city or community politics and government? Because you're the person to ask about this kind of thing. I mean, we talked about this a few months ago.
It's when we were first looking at Vision 2025, this was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. One of the conversations that came out of the Coolness Committee, which, yes, we had a Coolness Committee.
Please do tell.
And my wife told me one night after I came home from one, she said, Russell, if you're on the Coolness Committee, you're probably not very cool, but that's another story. But one of the outcomes of the Coolness Committee recommendations was to create a community that is a vibrant place for young professionals. Interestingly, at the time, in the context of Greenville, we didn't think that was possible. And so we landed on, let's make Greenville a place that's a great place for families where when you're 35, when you start to have children, you want to move the family back. Look at it now, though. I mean, it is at least in my mind, it's now a mecca for young professionals.
It really is.
And it's because there are things to do, there are opportunities that young professionals can get involved in, and that was a transformation for this city. Is the focus on young professionals, and I credit the chamber for a lot of that, and because they dug in and made it happen and created. As a matter of fact, one of the people that founded Pace Setters, it was Pulse at the time. Worked for me, Brock Kuntz. And so it was awesome watching Brock pull this thing together at a time that was interesting for Greenville.
Yeah. And what do you say to, people who are asking about maybe companies that are, listening or watching this who are questioning how to get their young professionals more involved in the community? Obviously, there are the chambers, but what are some outside of the box things that companies can be doing that they might not necessarily be thinking about?
When you think about companies in Greenville, I really can't think of any that discourage engagement and involvement outside of work. There's a fine line between if you get really involved in an organization, a nonprofit, or something going on in Greenville, there's a fine line between is it taking away from what you're doing during the workday. But I am a huge proponent of life outside the cubicle and creating opportunities for employees to have lives outside of work, to have balance, to have the chance to develop hobbies and develop their faith if they choose, and it's for the benefit of the company to have young professionals that are happy and love life.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen through 12-hour days and sitting behind a computer screen all day.
Right. I mean, I think we need to take that clip out and just post it everywhere on the YoProKnow's website, because that is the message I'm trying to get out to communities. And so once again, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this new podcast and this new branding coming from community leaders is really impactful.
And embracing our young professionals and giving them the chance to experiment,
Mm-hmm.
giving them the chance to explore different options. And, I don't think, if you look at my career path, it looks like it was highly planned. Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my career path was a path of closed windows and open doors, or is it the other way around? And I really believe that young professionals need to continually look at their options.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the criticisms of young professionals and their professional life is they have a tendency to switch jobs.
Right. Job hoppers.
And will do so pretty quickly at primarily, basically, for more money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a challenge for companies.
Mm-hmm.
I have two children who are, one is about to turn 30 and another is 27, and they're both young professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And their needs for careers are very different than what mine were when I was coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And they really do want life balance. They want a life outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
But it can also, the stuff you do outside of work can also be directly applicable to what you're doing on the job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm an example of having a side hustle, which is it's very common these days because young professionals are so entrepreneurial in nature. And so by stifling that creativity, you're going to stifle the creativity inside the office too, and in that 9 to 5. So I think that's really important. And there's so much to unpack, I think, from what you just said. But what would you say to companies that are trying to maybe stifle the outside work balance? Because more often than not, you see news articles coming out with experienced professionals, so above the age of 40, professionals who are telling us that what we're doing, what young professionals are doing, is unacceptable. They've paid their dues. We need to do it now too, which I still agree. I think everyone should pay their dues. But what would you say to people who are trying to stifle that creativity and try to stifle the work-life balance that we're trying to achieve?
It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense for a company. No company wants unhappy, overworked employees that I know of.
Yeah.
And there's some examples I can think of companies that have backed off a bit on trying to control the amount of time people spend in the office. Was an interesting phenomenon that I've seen after COVID is the remote work opportunities for remote work. Both my sons remote work. One is in Manhattan, and he's remote working to the West Coast. Another son is in Atlanta, and he's doing remote work with Princeton. And we've got to embrace the ability for companies to let young professionals work remotely. Yeah. And that is great for Greenville. Greenville is a fabulous place for remote working. Our quality of life is great for most. Our cost of living is reasonable, and it's a really good place to be. So if we can convince companies to allow more remote working, I think job satisfaction will go up. Me, I prefer to be in an office. And I think my productivity is better if I'm at a place, as opposed to one of my children says he's much more productive remotely because he doesn't have the distractions. But it is in the best interest of companies to encourage people to be complete people, to be, you're not just a worker bee, you're also an interesting person. And I don't know how many companies would disagree with that.
I think that disagreeing with that and actually applying it are two very different things. But all of the points that you mentioned are so important. And I think it directly goes back to the message that, we're not just trying to help young professionals and stop them from job hopping all over the place. We're trying to develop future leaders. And so even if they stay for more than a year, which is right now, like, I think the average is about a year for young professionals staying in a company before they leave. Even if they bump that up to 5, that maximizes the company's, productivity. It can have the impact of increasing revenue. There's so many variables there. And so knowing that information and knowing that there is going to be a very large group of people retiring from the workforce soon, from that boomer generation, how will that affect the community that we live in? How will that change workplaces? What is your take on that? And if there's an impact on government as well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
One of my concerns about Greenville in the upstate is we no longer have the powerful, inspirational leaders that we had a generation ago. We no longer have the Max Hellers and the Buck Nichols and people that are a little bit bigger than life in many ways. But I worry about the next wave of leadership. I worry about who's going to run for public office when I'm no longer around. I don't want to encourage people to run against me. But who's going to be around when the next wave, when the boomers start retiring, and we start going into the sunset? I worry about that. And I think the chamber has done an excellent job in trying to inspire that. I hope some of our local companies, especially those that are in the innovative space, will help develop better citizens and people that want to get involved and engaged. And it's important for us as a community to provide those opportunities and to provide training. Obviously, I'm a proponent of lifelong learning, and as a young professional, I think it's really important that you're always taking classes, you're always taking seminars, and trying to find ways to connect. The connections are just so important, and basically for quality of life. I mean, we all want friends, and we all want people we can hang out with. So I worry about the next wave of leadership in Greenville. There's a great fear. My perception is there's a fear among young professionals of, I'm afraid to ask. I'm afraid to ask a mentor to be a mentor. Quite frankly, we're honored. I mean, if somebody calls me and says, "Will you be my mentor?" I'm like, well, first, why? And then the second question is absolutely. Because if I can have that impact on someone's life, it's just really pretty cool. And the thing about mentoring, though, is as a mentor, you never know the impact that you really have. I go to meetings every now and then, and someone will come up to me and say, I was a mentee 10 years ago, and what you said during meeting number 3 really inspired me. I said, wow, that's pretty cool.
You're like, cool.
So the impact of mentors is so important, and it's helpful.
Helpful. And it makes such a big impact on the young professionals' lives. It's made a huge impact on my life. It's really why I believe I have been able to build a business has been because of the leaders in Greenville. And so I hope that people who are listening or watching outside of Greenville, I hope that they have these types of communities, but I feel like we have something really special here. And
the other piece of advice, when you're looking for volunteer work, when you're looking for things to do outside of work, don't do what is expected.
Mm-hmm.
When I first moved back to Greenville, I was on 15 boards of directors, and I wasn't passionate about any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope no one who was one of those 15 takes offense, but I was on boards because I thought they were the right boards to be on.
Mm-hmm.
And I would highly encourage young professionals, if you get involved with a nonprofit, follow your passion. Find an issue that is really important to you and that keeps you up at night. Or maybe I should rephrase that more positively, or gets you up in the morning with, I can't wait to do this work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you follow that passion, the opportunities will come. The chances to be on boards. And every young professional that asks me how to get involved, they say, what board can I be on? And it ain't all about boards. It's doing work days, cleaning up the Reedy River. It's just having opportunities to build connections and build the relationships.
Yeah.
And to try some things out that you otherwise wouldn't have a chance to do.
Absolutely.
And experiment a little bit.
And you can really find out a lot about yourself too in those moments, I think.
And other people.
And that's a great point as well. So just to wrap things up, and I am going to ask for some final pieces of advice, but your kids are young professionals. You've talked about that several times today. You've worked with hundreds of young professionals over the years. What advice, final advice do you have for business owners and leaders about how to reach them and empower them that you might not have already mentioned today?
When I got involved in Vision 2025, my focus or my reason for being involved was a little selfish. I wanted to be involved because I wanted to create a place that my two sons would want to come back to. And I wanted to create a place where they would pick up the phone like I did 20-something years ago and say, Mom, I'm coming home. And right now, Greenville doesn't have the jobs that are in the fields that they're interested in. So the prospect of them coming back soon is not very high. But, excuse me, but as a city, how do we create an environment where young people want to come home? And if you're not from here, how do we create an environment where young professionals will want to make this home and have ownership of and attachment to the community? So I would encourage businesses to, use Greenville is a great selling point, and use the asset of Greenville to create an environment where people want to move to and people want to be part of and engaged. Part of my dissertation work is going to be on place attachment and how do we create ownership of a community. And a lot of that is driven by engagement and involvement and driven by the ownership that people have of a community. I love nothing more than when I hear someone downtown talk about my Greenville and they're not from here. It's unique and pretty special.
It really is. And I feel the same way. It's a really amazing place. So to wrap things up today, Russell, any last minute words of advice that you have that you'd like to share with the audience?
I would encourage young professionals to take a risk and to do things, get out of your comfort zone and to do things that you may not be comfortable with. Being young, you have the opportunity to experiment a little bit and to try your hand at things you may not be good at. Don't be afraid to fail. If you're not hitting bumps in the road, you're not trying hard enough. And we don't learn unless we try. And also, call us. If you have somebody that you think is fun and cool and interesting, call and have a cup of coffee or a beer. And Greenville is the way it is because of the beers that are consumed and the cups of coffee that are consumed across the table from each other, just like this.
Yeah.
And I would encourage young professionals to, set every week meet with someone new, and just learn more. People love talking about themselves.
They do, yeah.
And so take advantage of that.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to end the interview. Russell, thank you again for being with us.
Pleasure.
This was amazing. I wish we had more time. I'm sure we could have taken another hour, but thank you again for joining us on The Great Retention with Camber Parker. Before you go, remember this: young professionals make up nearly half of the workforce today and are expected to jump at a rapid pace in the next decade. What will you do to help them become the next great leaders we need for our future? Join us next time for more information on how to recruit and retain young professionals. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. This helps others know where to find episodes about this topic. And don't forget to share with your coworkers, most importantly. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.